Hello, I am the Script Doctor and welcome to the channel. We're here! Finally, after 10 long weeks, we've made it to the end of Lower Decks. What a disappointing 10 weeks it has been. Even when the show has its moments that look like it's going in a good direction, it stops and then doubles back. And this week's episode is a great example of doubling back on the progress made previously. The show opens with a First Officer's log referencing Beta 3 from the Return of the Archons. The context is that the inhabitants have fallen back into old habits of worshipping Landru again. But Landru was destroyed over 100 years ago. Did someone repair the computer, and if so, who? Why, and how? The society of Beta 3 was antiquated when we first saw them, pre-computer technology or knowledge to its inhabitants, or because the Landru machine was over 6,000 years old, post-computer technology to a point where they reverted back to an antiquated lifestyle. Either way, since being freed by Kirk and Spock, they hadn't rebuilt their lost technological progress. Speaking of Kirk and Spock, after Ransom completes his references, we get a speech from Freeman to the Beta 3 people, technically asking them to stop worshipping a machine. Landru makes his dramatic statements and Freeman just threatens to paradox Landru into destroying itself, but that's all she does. She doesn't deactivate Landru or anything. She literally leaves the planet asking the Beta 3 people to write themselves a reminder note not to listen to Landru. Ransom and Freeman return to the ship where Freeman reveals that she is getting discouraged by the actions and protocols of Starfleet, feeling that the Federation is not living up to its responsibilities when following up with planets they've made contact with. Ransom refers to those planets and the 2260s as the TOS era. He claims it stands for Those Old Scientists, then references Spock and Scotty. It's not a very good inside joke. I mean, if you really want to use TOS era, why not make it stand for That One Ship? After all, because of budgetary reasons for the show, Star Trek only had the Constitution-class ship in that first series. You could make a joke how all Starfleet did during the 2260s was build Constitution-class ships, and it wasn't until the 2280s when we saw the Miranda, the Oberth, and the Excelsior-class ships carry us into the 24th century. You could throw in a character moment for Freeman, admiring the Constitution class, arguing it was the most efficient design of that era and that some are still in service to this day. But Freeman brings up an interesting idea, that Starfleet should be doing follow-up missions more efficiently and regularly to avoid situations like what we saw on Beta 3. However, at the end of the Star Trek episode The Return of the Archons, sociologist Lindstrom remained on the planet with a party of experts to help restore the planet's culture to a human form. And this is an important aspect of that original episode, because it conflicts with information that comes later towards the end of this episode. When Freeman returns to the bridge, she orders the ship to their next mission, but is told by one of her officers that there are still crew on the planet. Cut to Mariner handing out art supplies to the children of Beta 3. She knows paints and knows brushes, but apparently has never seen a pair of compasses before. Boimler is there to join in on Mariner's fun at her surprise. The Cerritos contacts Boimler to have him and Mariner return to the ship, but he has removed his tunic and can't hear the order. However, because the comms are open, the bridge crew can hear everything between Mariner and Boimler, especially when Boimler reveals that he knows Mariner is Freeman's daughter. With this secret finally exposed, Freeman takes over a console and beams the two to the bridge, where Boimler freaks out, thus ending the teaser. After the opening credits, we don't return to the Cerritos just yet. Instead, we are introduced to the Solvang. After a close-up of its name and registry, we get a chyron of its location, the Kala system, and the ship's name again. I guess in case we missed it in the middle of our screen a moment ago? A tad redundant and kind of tipping the hat of someone working on Lower Decks knowing that not many people are really paying attention to this series. This new ship we're seeing is under the command of Captain Dayton, whom we saw earlier this season in Much Ado About Boimler. In that episode, she lost her ship the Rubido to an alien entity, and now she has a new ship? Picard lost the Stargazer in 2355 at the Battle of Maxia. His next command was the Enterprise, and that was in the year 2264, 9 years later after a massive investigation into the Stargazer's loss. After the Enterprise D was destroyed in 2371, it was still another 2 years before Picard got the Enterprise E, and that had more to do with his reputation as the flagship captain of Starfleet. Who the hell is Captain Dayton, and why does she get a new ship only 3 weeks later? Especially since, according to dialogue provided by other characters, she is constantly in need of help from others. Dayton admires the new ship and cherishes it so much that the crew aren't even allowed to wear their shoes. She also gets upset when she finds that the protective film over her consoles isn't being properly maintained. That's kind of a joke. treating a starship like it's a new iPhone or how grandma had plastic over the couch. Before we learn more about this crew, the Solvang is then surprised by an alien vessel that opens fire. As they try to make their escape, the enemy vessel latches tow cables on their nacelles and hull. The captain's orders as a result are to enter warp, but because they're anchored by another ship, the nacelle breaks off, causing an explosion and subsequent destruction of her ship. Wow, never thought I'd see a captain more pathetic than Esteban. After that set piece, we finally return to the Cerritos, where Rutherford is toying with his implant and discovering various behavior modes, while Tendi is super excited to acclimate a new crew member. This crew member is an exocomp, an artificial intelligence introduced in the TNG episode The Quality of Life. Like Tendi, the exocomp is also super chipper. There aren't any real jokes in this scene or character development. Personally, I'd hardly call Rutherford changing behavior modes development. It is a conflict, but one somewhat introduced by his own actions. It really feels more like a red herring than anything that could escalate the stakes or create drama. In Freeman's ready room, her and Mariner complain about the stigma of having a daughter under her command, especially one with the most merit points of any officer. Mariner argues that they might be able to make it work, referencing Wesley Crusher, and we all know how loved he was.
Shut up, Wesley!
Ransom enters the ready room to get input on the officer candidates for promotion to the Sacramento. He goes on to apologize to Mariner for treating her the way he has, and both Mariner and Freeman don't want Ransom to change his tune regarding her. They throw in some lowbrow wordplay about being hard. While I am a big fan of clever wordplay, it's not as funny when the character spouting off the Freudian slips catches themselves and then goes down a rabbit hole of embarrassment, constantly using the same word. There's value to pacing and also opportunity to use other words to escalate the awkwardness.
And I know it will make things hard on all of us. Let me rephrase that. I'm sure we can handle ourselves. Comport ourselves as professionals. That is all.
Mariner is quite frustrated by this change in atmosphere on the ship, now that everyone knows she's the captain's daughter. She gets surprised by Lieutenant Steve Levy, an officer she dated once last year, and happens to be a conspiracy nut claiming that Wolf 359 was an inside job, and that changelings aren't real and the Dominion War didn't happen. He asks Mariner to pass along decorating ideas for the captain's yacht, to which Mariner obliges. This new character is kind of like a gem in the rough. I'm rather fascinated by a Starfleet officer that is also a conspiracy theorist. I think that's an interesting dynamic to put in a Star Trek comedy show, especially with Iconians. Hearing speculations as to what the Romulans were doing for 60-odd years before returning in the TNG episode The Neutral Zone, even going so far as to say the Enterprise never crossed the Great Barrier at the center of the galaxy. It has a flair of dramatic irony to it. But I digress. Mariner continues to get pestered by other members of the crew. On the bridge, the Cerritos picks up part of the Solvang's distress call. Ransom informs the captain that the Titan is in range as well, but Freeman would rather go rescue Dayton for the laughs herself. On the lower decks, Mariner is frustrated that she's the center of attention on the ship and can't get away with her sneaky Robin Hood actions. Boimler mocks her before presenting a letter of recommendation that he wants signed so he can transfer to the Sacramento. Boimler desperately wants to go, and Mariner gets the idea that she could apply for the transfer as well, as no one on board would know of her parentage, and she'd be able to resume her normal behavior flying under the radar. Mariner starts behaving like a model officer, pulling down her sleeves and adjusting her hair, all with the goal of getting off the Cerritos. 9 episodes and 10 minutes into the finale, and Mariner finally has a goal.
Well, better late than never.
Boimler remarks how no one will fall for her deception when Shax bumps into him wanting to give Mariner a present, which appears to be a poorly wrapped bat'leth. This story gets interrupted for a brief moment with Tendi and the exocomp who has named herself Peanut Hamper. Okay. Yeah, nothing happens with this subplot, so we're just going to return to Boimler and Mariner competing for that promotion. They visit Ransom, who reviews Boimler's spotless record while lifting a dumbbell, but finds himself caught between promoting on merit and promoting on nepotism. It's not really a difficult choice, I mean, unless you live in Hollywood. Boimler gets upset at Mariner for pretending to be a good officer instead of actually being a good officer and not coasting on nepotism. Their argument gets interrupted when the Cerritos drops out of warp to find the wreckage of the Solvang being harvested. They go on the defensive and send out a distress call as the enemy ship attacks. When they are snagged by tow cables, Ransom orders to go to warp, a mistake made by Dayton and anyone with a functioning brain. But luckily, Freeman belays that command and orders a complete shutdown. The ship loses their port nacelle and everyone is thrown as a result. Mariner and Boimler make their way to the bridge where they find Freeman injured. Phillips restores auxiliary power and they receive a communication from a Paclid who thinks the Cerritos is the Enterprise. The Paclids demand the ship pieces of the Cerritos to add to their ships to make them stronger. What's interesting is that this scene and the Paclids themselves are a perfect allegory for Bad Robot and Secret Hideout. They take pieces of other properties and force those pieces into something else and calling it new and theirs, when in reality it's a mangled mess that in the long term isn't really profitable. I think that's an appropriate category. Paclid, noun. A fictional species in Star Trek, driven by their unwillingness to develop technological knowledge on their own, desiring to instantly gain the power that other cultures enjoyed. Or, an individual unwilling to grow or develop knowledge in their field of work, wanting instant gratification and success by means of scavenging the superior work of others and forming it into a derivative soulless property. Example: you'll never get anything great from Alex Kurtzman. He's a Paclid. Boimler reveals that over the years, the Paclids have scavenged technology from over 30 different species to gain significant power over the Cerritos. Freeman remarks how the Paclids are not a joke anymore, and again, the parallel to the reality of where the Paclids started and the power they've stolen over the years and become a threat is remarkable. Paclid is turning out to be a very appropriate pejorative. The Paclids snag the Cerritos and bring it to their hull where they start cutting up the ship. None of the senior staff have any idea how to proceed, so Freeman turns to Mariner, who is the only one who could come up with a dangerous, half-baked solution that breaks Starfleet protocol and pisses her off. Mariner lets down her hair, rolls up her sleeves, and steals a plan from Roland Emmerich's Independence Day. Mariner contacts Rutherford and asks him to whip up a virus to get them out of this mess, and Rutherford proceeds to the holodeck and activates Badgie to help him code the virus. Badgie informs Rutherford that he needs his safety protocols disabled in order for him to complete the task. Rutherford asks if Badgie plans to kill him, and even though Badgie doesn't answer, Rutherford disables the safeties anyways, and Badgie provides 3 virus options to stop the Paclids, but there's a catch. The virus has to be uploaded manually. The Paclids with stolen transporter technology slowly beam aboard the Cerritos. They escape the bridge but are quickly intercepted by the Paclids and find themselves unarmed, which is an odd situation as there have been numerous times where the officers have had phasers on their person at times they otherwise shouldn't, most notably displayed in the first episode of this series. But not to worry for our team, as Mariner opens up panels in the corridor that reveal tons of weapons and contraband that she has stashed over the years. While they fight off the Paclids, Boimler admits that he wasn't angry at Mariner for trying to steal his promotion, but that he knows she'd get it and that he'd miss her not being around. Freeman is taken down by a Paclid, but Mariner comes to her rescue. As they make their way to sickbay, Mariner orders Ransom to cover their escape. Why is Mariner giving orders? I mean, aside from the contrived reason. It would be better and more fitting to his character if it were Ransom ordering them to sickbay while he watches their backs, because that's what a first officer in this situation would command. In sickbay, Rutherford arrives with the virus and informs the crew how it needs to be manually uploaded on the Paclid ship. The crew selects Peanut Hamper to take the virus over to the Paclids as it is small, undetectable, and can survive in space. But Peanut Hamper refuses. It turns out she joined Starfleet just to annoy her dad. I'm not even going to bother unpacking that because, again, the exocomp subplot is useless and a waste of time. Rutherford finally finds his normal behavior mode and volunteers to upload the virus himself, but Tendi doesn't want him to go because of the danger. Tendi tries to change his mode so he won't go on the mission, but Rutherford assures her he's good, and Shax picks him up to get him aboard the Paclid vessel. Shax hops into a derelict shuttle and they blast their way into the Paclid ship. For Shax, this is the best day of his life. He's in a dangerous situation and on the front line of combat. Rutherford gets inside and uploads the virus while Shax fights off the Paclids. As the upload nears completion, it slows because Badgie has corrupted it so that Rutherford has to stay behind and die with the destruction of the Paclid ship. Shax refuses to let that be the case and rips off Rutherford's augments, giving me a brief flashback of what they did to Icheb in Star Trek Picard. Shax throws Rutherford into the shuttle and physically pushes the shuttle back into space just before the Paclid ship explodes, sacrificing himself in a blaze of glory. Boimler takes the op station to provide exposition of the situation and bring up main power while Mariner takes the captain's chair. They start to make their escape, but they're not out of the woods yet, as 3 more Paclid ships arrive and surround the Cerritos. They launch their tow cables, about to pull the ship apart when the Titan warps in to the rescue, accompanied by the Jerry Goldsmith Star Trek fanfare from the motion picture and The Next Generation. Not Alexander Courage as credited in the show. Yes, he did write the original Star Trek theme, but I didn't hear it used in this episode. I heard Jerry Goldsmith's theme. We get Riker on the view screen ordering a red alert. But why? Would that not have been ordered before he came to the rescue? Were the actions the Titan took just now something the ship does regularly without an active emergency condition? Shouldn't he be saying something like, "Stand by, Cerritos"? Also, why is he wearing the DS9 and Nemesis uniforms? This show has established that the crew of the Cerritos are wearing the standard uniform in Starfleet. It's been consistent with other ships and the Admiralty. So what's the case here? Was the Titan stuck in another quadrant and didn't get the new uniforms downloaded to the replicators? Mariner refers to Riker as Will, and Riker responds that this rescue makes them even, because, of course, Mariner saved Riker in some capacity in the past. Boimler is amazed that Mariner knows Riker, and Mariner reveals that he's the one that's been sending her contraband all these years, an action originally unknown to Deanna, and now something she plans to discuss with Riker later. The Titan does significant damage to the Paclid ships, causing them to retreat and save the day. We cut to a space dock where the Cerritos is undergoing repairs. Freeman is refusing any cosmetic changes to the ship because she loves it just the way it is. Tendi sits with Rutherford, who is recovering but also missing much of his memory. Tendi is sort of sad by this, but also excited as they get to become best friends all over again. Freeman hosts a memorial for Shax and places one of his earrings on her mantle in her ready room. She talks with Mariner about the loss of Shax and what his spirit might be doing before putting her on report for her insubordination on Beta 3. Mariner defends her actions, claiming that they saved the ship, and Freeman agrees. Freeman highlights what she finds disappointing in Starfleet, such as considering Paclid to be a non-threat and Beta 3 just a known planet, which is ignoring the party that I mentioned at the start of this review that was left behind on Beta 3. They were there to help acclimate that species to their natural culture. Something of that magnitude would not be classified as just a known planet. Mariner claims that Starfleet's biggest flaws are that they observe and report and not maintain. Well, that is correct. Starfleet isn't about fixing the galaxy. They're a defensive wing of the Federation with a primary focus on exploration. It is not their duty nor their responsibility to fix societies planet to planet. It's an educational mission, not an imperial one. But it seems Mariner wants it to be imperial. Freeman has the same idea and suggests working together with Mariner to fix things in Starfleet. This conversation is tantamount to conspiracy, a mother and daughter team committing whatever acts they themselves feel are justified to fix problems they find in their society. That is incredibly horrible and very antithetical to what Starfleet and Star Trek is as a whole. It's a violation of the Prime Directive. Starfleet and the Federation are prohibited from imposing one culture's values on another, and here we see essentially these two characters plotting to do just that from here on out. Could these two be responsible for Starfleet failing by the time of Star Trek Picard? That's something to think about, wouldn't you say? Getting back to the rest of the episode, we get a number of ending buttons where Riker greets Freeman, claiming to be her mentor back in the day, while Ransom asks Deanna to hook him up with some Betazoid women. Boimler thanks Mariner for being a good mentor over the course of this season, and decides to relax and forget worrying about rank. This is immediately followed by Riker commending Boimler on his work and offering him a post on the Titan. We cut to his new quarters, listening in on a recording from Mariner chewing him out for leaving. Boimler has finally gotten his dream. It's a very strange way he did get this dream, as he wasn't really the most active participant in this episode. While he may have earned it by having a spotless record, it was missing that something extra by him specifically to warrant this reward. The episode ends with Riker on the bridge remarking on the Star Trek Enterprise show, and then incorporating a jazz-style countdown for engaging the warp drive. It's a very weird sight to behold, to see the writers draw from Riker's character and then use it in a very out-of-character way. Riker's a lover of jazz, but would he really incorporate that love into his duties? We have 7 seasons and 4 movies exploring Riker as a character that says otherwise. Star Trek Lower Decks is a really poor Star Trek show. It uses the franchise history as a crutch instead of a foundation for humor. I will actually refer to Jerry O'Connell, who had some interesting things to say about another franchise that is quite effective here.
What is happening? This is the best they could do? This is it? This is it. I gotta tell you, even talking about it just really angers me.
Out of the 10 episodes, I only found 2 of them to be somewhat good, Temporal Edict and Crisis Point, and 2 out of 10 is an appropriate percentage regarding the quality of this show. What they do manage to achieve, for lack of a better term, are the set pieces. In this episode especially, they have good set pieces for a Star Trek show. They have conflict, escalated stakes, sacrifice, but it's missing the most important aspect that makes all of those things exciting and memorable: characters. More importantly, characters we like to watch. And Star Trek Lower Decks is just another example of what not to forget to do when writing a show. As a writer, you have to find a way for the audience to love your characters. Not to love them in an obvious term, but love to watch them, love to hate them, love to cheer for them, love their presence and what they bring to the story because they're well written, believable, and take us through a journey of emotions that don't leave us upset or disappointed by the end. And for a show with a premise that is completely dependent on great characters, Lower Decks failed to develop them or give them the focus they needed. To paraphrase T.S. Eliot, this is the way Star Trek Lower Decks ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Literally. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.